Hello, learning nerds, and welcome on into the nerdiest video you're going to see today, ChatGPT. It's all that we can talk about nowadays, but for a good reason. The way that we work, the way that we learn, and the way that we teach is going to be changed because of AI like ChatGPT. And the more research I've done and the more people I have talked to, I am sensing that there is a lot of confusion and misunderstandings around exactly what is ChatGPT and where are we really going here. So allow me to explain to you a way that might resonate with you about what exactly is ChatGPT. Back in the day, you probably used something called AOL Instant Messenger. And inside of AOL Instant Messenger, you had a buddy list. And in your buddy list was something that was called Smarter Child. Smarter Child was a chatbot that came out of 2001, I think was when it was created, and it was designed to do very simple tasks as far as for you could ask it about the weather, you could ask it movie times, and it would respond back to you. Now, of course, none of us used it for this type of purpose, and we try to be able to break it and see, does it actually want to take over humanity? Does it want to conquer the world and other types of crazy, wacky things? But we were kids, and that's what we really used it for. Now, fast forward 22 years in the future, and now we have ChatGPT, which is essentially an extremely intelligent chatbot. It is a upgraded, smarter child, if you will. That's how I think about it. And if I'm making a prediction here about 2 years from now in the future or so, I think that we are going to have AI personal assistants to help us with basically everything. It's almost like we're going to be using Clippy again, but he's going to be super intelligent and awesome and can help us with our different types of tasks pertaining to our jobs and pertaining to learning. So with all of that being said, ChatGPT is not perfect. It needs that human touch, that human element to it. It needs feedback. So because of that, I do not think that is going to replace us. And I think that now we should be embracing technology and learning more about how to actually use it. So to me, ChatGPT is a Kickstarter. It is a boost of creativity when you are struggling and you're trying to come up with different types of ideas and you just need some help. Well, that's where ChatGPT can really come in handy. And that's how actually I have been using it. I'm an instructor, I'm an instructional designer. And since ChatGPT was released, I have been using it pretty much every day, dabbling with different types of ideas and experimenting with things. And I think I have now gotten the most out of the product that I possibly can. And that's what I want to be able to share with you today in this video. I'm going to be sharing with you 15 different ways about how you can use ChatGPT, whether for your own job, whether for education, training, or for anything else of the sort. Now, because there has been some confusion around how do you actually use ChatGPT, I'm going to show you every step of the way about how I actually use this, pertaining to how much details I put inside of the prompts and the instructions. And once again, it's a chat bot. So in order to have a chat, you need to have a conversation. There has to be a bit of a back and forth, which a lot of people don't seem to do. They just fire off one command, send it on over. And then when it doesn't give it back what they're actually looking for, they're like, it's not good. And then they kind of move on. That's not the way to use this thing. So I will show you literally every step about how I use this. I'll be sharing my screen a lot inside of this video. And also, I am well aware that 15 different items, it's gonna make for a long video, let's be honest here. So my feelings are not going to be hurt. If you go down below, look at the timestamps and find the different types of ideas that resonate with you, please feel free to do that. And of course, you can just follow along with me inside of this however long video this is really going to be. So with all of that said, let's get started. And of course, the first thing that we need to be able to talk about, number one, to me, is going to be updating your resume, your CV, or your cover letter template. Why is this number one? It's because of the fact that I care about you as far as with your career and your own professional development, and we always need a little bit of help pertaining to resumes, CVs, and cover letters. You know, and I know, how difficult they can be, and especially too, if you are applying time and time again for different types of jobs, you're trying to be able to customize them, to tailor them towards making sure that they are meeting the needs of what the job posting is talking about, and things of that nature. But of course, that takes forever. So wouldn't it be great to have a bit of help here as far as we're with our good old friend ChatGPT and being able to create some type of template for you to be able to go off of Well, it is entirely possible. So let's explore an example together, and I'll share with you what I've actually been trying to be able to do with this. So this is what I put inside of ChatGPT, and I said, can you create for me a resume of a senior instructional designer working at MIT? I've been working here from 2018 to present day. And of course, it says, sure, here's a sample resume for you. It starts off by giving some of the traditional type of information: full name, address, phone number, email, standard stuff. It's always going to be on your resume. Then goes into a summary, which is interesting. And the summary says, senior instructional designer with over 5 years of experience creating innovative and effective learning experiences. I like that. Skilled in developing instructional strategies and designing instructional materials for a range of subjects and audiences. Passionate about using technology to enhance learning outcomes. That last line is kind of odd. I would try to be able to change that, which also goes into this, by the way, once again, folks, is that this needs a human touch. It is not perfect. It is going to need your assistance and your feedback in order to make it better every single time, which of course I'm going to show you that throughout this video. Goes into the education, then goes into the professional experience, and this is what I really wanted to be able to look at a bit more. Overall, it's not bad. I like about the fact about how it mentions that I collaborate with faculty members to design learning experiences. Certainly is something that I do. Utilizing best practices in instructional design to develop e-learning modules, interactive simulations, digital resources. That's okay. Create and maintain project timelines and budgets for multiple projects while managing priorities and deadlines. Absolutely. Working with SMEs, evaluating the overall effectiveness, providing recommendations for improvement. All of those things, I do. Would I want to be able to add more to this to make it a little bit more customized and a bit better? Absolutely. So let me show you that about how to take this information and then being able to go and add a little bit more into this, because once again, it's a chat bot. That's the whole thing. So let's go down below and let's actually put in a couple of recommendations here. Looks great for the professional experience. Could you add in more about project management, designing learning experiences, collaborating with SMEs, andragogy, and relationship management. Oh, also, and with research and conducting research. Okay, let's see what it gives us. So overall, with the recommendations that we just gave ChatGPT and what it was able to go and to turn out, not bad. It's really not that bad. If I was making my resume right now and really wanted to be able to try to use something as far as for a template and a guide and to work with, I could certainly work with this information, and which is why this is my number one tip for you, because everyone always needs to be able to update their resumes, their CVs, and their cover letters. 100% take advantage of this with ChatGPT. My next tip is going to be designing your syllabus. As we all know, usually there is some form of a guide or something to follow pertaining to if you are teaching at a university or an institution, and you're trying to be able to think more about following the standard guidelines and the procedures. But sometimes you have a lot of creativity and freedom for trying to be able to make a syllabus, but you want to make sure that the right information is going to be, of course, inside of there. Well, once again, ChatGPT can be pretty handy and can also even give you ideas around trying to be able to design your overall classroom or for your overall training. So let's actually use this as an example. Inside of here, I said that I'm going to be teaching a new course on the fundamentals of leadership. It's called Leadership 101, super cliche. In this course, I'll be covering many of the main leadership theories like servant leadership, transformational leadership, situational leadership, adaptive leadership, and strengths-based leadership. The class is 8 weeks in length. Can you create for me a syllabus with these items in mind? And then here is what it gave me, was a sample type of a syllabus. It essentially talks about introduction to leadership and then all the different forms of leadership theories that I mentioned. Within each week, it also talks about providing definitions, characteristics, and case studies, which is a little bit redundant. So obviously we would want to be able to change up that. But then something that I did find pretty cool is that down below at the end of week 8, it then provided some different types of suggestions for assessments with readings, with discussion posts, with doing a case study study analysis, and then a final project. And it even gives a suggestion about what the final project should be, which is that students will develop a personal leadership development plan incorporating the theories and strategies covered in the course. So hypothetically speaking, let's say that you were making a syllabus for the first time and you didn't even have a final project yet in mind. You could then ask it to be able to create a final project for you and give you some suggestions and some things to be able to work with. Not a bad idea, and certainly this can be quite handy. The next item on this list could literally be this entire video if I really wanted it to be, which in my opinion is going to be designing activities and assessments. As an instructional designer and an instructor, I of course love learning activities and learning assessments, and I found it so interesting to be able to say, could I have a helping hand as far as through a ChatGPT to be able to create my assessments and my activities? Now, I've used a variety of different kinds of ways and just trying to be able to see what it does really well at, and some areas are not so much, and definitely need some areas of improvement. So I've been able to ask it as far as for being able to create practice questions, for being able to create reflections, exams, multiple choice questions, things of that nature, even including going a little bit more in depth through talking about scenario-based learning, case studies. And the one thing I want to show you right now too is talking more about a role play activity, because for different types of courses, role play really comes in handy, especially pertaining to sales, negotiations, any different type of course like that. Trying to be able to have your students and your learners go through role playing activities can be very useful. But of course, it can take quite a bit of time to be able to create a script and come up with ideas. So once again, turn to ChatGPT and see what it can do. So for the purposes of this case, I made this super simple. It's one line. And I just said create for me a role-playing activity for two students trying to negotiate a sponsorship deal. This is what ChatGPT came up with. It said for your scenario, you are both college students who are members of the university's ultimate frisbee team. Your team is planning to participate in a national tournament, but you don't have enough money to cover the costs of travel, lodging, and equipment. You've decided to approach a local sports realtor, Sports Empire, to negotiate a sponsorship deal. One of you will act as a representative of the ultimate frisbee team, and the other will act as a representative of Sports Empire. It then goes on to provide different types of instructions. We're talking about setting up the negotiation, determine who is going to play which role, talk about choosing a location, talking about setting the tone as far as which is an interesting thing. Actually, I'm glad I said this, because different types of negotiations and role-playing activities, sometimes you're going to have the tone be set as far as for dealing with someone who is irate and they're upset and you're trying to calm them down. And then other times it's more of a friendly banter and trying to be able to go back and forth. It's a good idea to have a mix about that. So I like the fact that it talked about setting the tone. Then it went into beginning the negotiation, talking about introductions, and really just going through with the entire idea about a proposal for a sponsorship. It then talked about having the other person do a counter proposal, then really get into the meat and potatoes of it all, talking about negotiating, eventually agreeing, and then finally, last but not least, comes reflecting upon the overall learning experience. And then this asks students to discuss what went well and what could have been improved, as well as insights that they gained about the negotiation process and how to negotiate effectively. And then something that's kind of funny, because ChatGPT kind of has its own sense of humor, and it says at the bottom, remember, negotiation is not about winning or losing, but finding a mutually beneficial solution that meets the needs of both parties. Have fun, be creative, and good luck. So it's kind of funny how it does that. But folks, not bad. Not bad at all. And I have found that the more I keep on going about with doing this is the first time, by the way. There is no other things that I put inside of here. I could then change the different type of, if I wanted to change the location, the setting, if I wanted to be able to direct for the tone, as far as for saying that one person is really irate and one person is kind of more whatever. I could go about with doing all of those different types of things to being able to really get the kind of details that I want out of my own type of personal role-playing activity. Now, as I mentioned, you can do this for practice questions, exams, reflection, multiple choice questions, case studies. I found that being able to use this for case studies is really effective. It's a different type of wording. I found that I wanted to be able to say scenario-based learning, but it didn't give me what I wanted for scenarios. So I had to kind of go back and forth. And eventually I figured out where to be able to settle that. It was kind of an interesting experiment to be able to figure that out. But the point is, you can 100% do this for coming up with activities, assessments, exercises, or anything else of the sort. My next tip is with video production. Now, every person has their own type of style when it comes to videos. Some people like to have a transcript and read everything literally line by line using a type of a teleprompter in back of the camera. Other people like to be able to rehearse, and then they can try to be able to draw from memory and talk about the important points. Other people entirely just like to wing it. They just show up and kind of go for it. All depends upon your style. I have worked with many subject matter experts and faculty members and trainers over the years, and everyone really has their own type of way as far as for preparing for a video. But let's say that you are trying to do this on your own. You're creating videos for your courses and for your trainings, and you want a little bit of assistance pertaining to thinking more about what exactly are you going to be talking about inside of the video. Maybe you have some of the gist of the ideas for the main topics, but that's not all you really have. You need more information to be able to go off of. Can you use ChatGPT for this? Of course you can, as you can probably guess. Of course you can. We can use it for pretty much anything, which is kind of mind-boggling. So for this, I wanted to be able to go and to fire this up and to be able to say, can you help me make a video talking about the basics of servant leadership? And here is what ChatGPT came up with. So I said, I need to create a video about the basics of servant leadership. Can you write for me a transcript for what I should say? Just having bullet points would be great. And then sure enough, it goes into the basics and the bullet points of servant leadership. We're starting first with the definition, going into the characteristics, talking about listening, how it's a key part of servant leadership, empowerment, collaboration, and then finally, last but not least, impact. Overall, pretty good. I mean, it gave me what I was looking for. I wanted the basics of servant leadership. It ended up giving me these bullet points. And then let's say that I'm going to be recording my own video. I can put these on a slide, or I can put them on a laptop in the background or something. And I can just try to go and being able to rehearse and then to record this type of video. Let's say though, but after just looking at that, actually, I realized I need more help. If it can give me an exact transcript for what I should say, it would be far more helpful. Let's see what it can actually do. Okay, well, I'm going to fast forward in time here because that just took a while to actually make the full transcript for the video. But here was my prompt. I said, I changed my mind. Could you create for me a transcript for all of these bullet points? And then sure enough, it gave me an entire transcript about every single thing we just talked about, where it literally says, hi, and welcome to this video on the basics of servant leadership. We'll be discussing what servant leadership is, the characteristics of a servant leader, and the impact of servant leadership on teams and organizations. And then it goes into the entire thing. Crazy. Like it wrote out what someone could say as far as for your faculty member, an instructor, yourself, a SME. It literally gives you line by line what to be able to say. This is mind-blowing. I mean, honestly, this is super crazy to be able to think about this. Are you going to have to go through and actually change the words and change definitions and go through different types of things to make it your own style? Of course. There's going to be some words inside of here, but you're like, I have never said this word once in my life. That's not my style. That's not my tone. I need to, get rid of that. And that's absolutely A-okay. Once again, the point though is that it's a Kickstarter, boosted creativity, and you can use this for going forwards, and you can keep on going as much or as little as you would like. You can add more to the transcript. You can say, actually, can you condense this? Can you summarize this into fewer words? And eventually, once you have all of these different types of transcripts, you can then use these and repurpose them inside of your classroom or inside of the training. So if I wanted to be able to take every transcript, let's say from the module or from the week itself, I can take these, I could condense them, I could put in a ChatGPT and said, hey, can you summarize these? Can you take this and make a type of an introductory paragraph? Could you make a prompt based out of this? Could you make an overview based around this information? Or even, could you take this information and can you transform it into an assignment? It can do all of these things, folks. So here's another idea about what you can actually do with ChatGPT. The next item on my list is verifying information. And this is kind of interesting because depending upon your background and what course or training or program or workshop or whatever you are developing, sometimes you are the subject matter expert. Other times you're not, and you're partnering with someone to be able to try to actually design this overall learning experience. This is where ChatGPT can also come into handy as well too. Let's say that you are working on something and you're like, you know what, I really want to be able to do some more research on here just to make sure that I am on track with things. What would you typically do in that type of a situation? Well, usually you would go to the subject matter expert, you would ask them more, or perhaps you have a different type of a resource you can go back to as far as for a textbook or a video or something else along those lines. Other times, though, you're going to find yourself stuck and let's say you're working on it late at night. You don't have the information. You don't have a person you can work with. What do? Well, you can guess now what you can actually do. And this is really interesting because it can give you a ton of different type of information. You can verify this, you can double check this, and you can even ask it its own sources as far as for saying, hey, how are you pulling this information? Where are you really getting this from? Because of course, you can debate with it as well too, which is really fascinating. I've had many conversations with it pertaining to learning styles, and I'm not going to go into that entire thing, but I kept on asking about it. It was just like, why are we talking about this? But let's not speak about learning styles. Let me give you an example about how we can actually use this pertaining to a topic that maybe you're not as well versed in and you want some more information around that. So to give you an example, let's say that I am absolutely struggling to learn about the framework Understanding by Design, or as you might know it as UBD. I go into ChatGPT, and this is what I say. I literally say, I am struggling with the concept of understanding by design. Can you tell me more about this method and the significance of UBD? Now, this is what it actually pops up for me. It talks about how Understanding by Design is indeed an educational framework for designing curriculum assessments and instruction. It also tells me too about who developed it for Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins. And then it goes into the key idea behind Understanding by Design. It talks about the main benefits. It talks about how it promotes deep understanding, transfer of learning, all this other good stuff. And then it kind of gives me a summary about overall, here is the bigger picture about Understanding by Design. So with all that information, I'm like, great, I have at least a starting point, but let's say you still want even more information afterwards. I then said, could you provide for me more sources to learn about UBD? And then it goes into, sure, here are 5 additional resources to learn more about it. So it gives me the official website of the UBD framework. It talks about, of course, the book Understanding by Design. It then goes into even more websites and talking more about where I can learn more about UBD. So if you want verifying information, if you want to double check your work, if you want to be able to have someone essentially give you a helping hand with learning more about a certain subject matter, this is it. It can actually do this. Now, one thing that I love too about this is that it is actually giving you the sources. It's not giving you the references per se because it is generating this type of data. It's pulling from multiple different types of data sets and it's forming its own conclusion, its own answer for you. So it's not going to be able to say like, hey, Luke, I directly took this information from X, Y, and Z, but by asking it questions to be able to say, can you at least give me more sources, more resources, more materials? It can indeed do that for you as well. Now, if you know me, you know that I love podcasts. So obviously, somewhere in this video, I have to talk about podcasts. Podcasts are extremely interesting pertaining to training and with education because it is a supplemental type of a resource that you can use to provide a different type of modality for a content for your learners and for your students. And for many folks, especially our adult learners out there, they enjoy listening to podcasts. It's become a part of our daily way of life is that we listen to podcasts while we're doing things as far as we're driving, doing the dishes, walking the dog, whatever. So if we can be able to give more flexibility for our students and learners as far as for how they're going to be hearing about the information we are going to be covering within the course, for training, the program, the whatever, well, then that makes a lot of sense. So why not actually make a podcast for your own learning experience? But let's say you've never done this before. You want to be able to do it, but you really don't know the steps about how exactly do you go about making a podcast for a course. Well, we can do this. So for many podcasters out there, especially for those who are new to this, or perhaps you don't want to become a podcaster, you just want to be able to go and to try to do a podcast, where you typically start off with is by creating a script, and then that is what you are going to be reading from. But let's say that you want to be able to go and to get a source of inspiration as far as to making a transcript about your different type of content. Well, what can we do? Of course, you know what to do already. So let's give us a shot and see what ChatGPT is going to give us. So for this prompt, I said, can you write for me a podcast script about the importance of culture pertaining to leadership? In this situation, I was doing a type of a leadership training and I was going to be covering culture. So I wanted this to be able to go off of that. Now, here's something that I found very interesting is that it started to give me a podcast script. And of course, it does its thing by being able to say that there should be introduction music and then the host should be introducing themselves. But inside of this script, where it started from is that it actually gave me a type of an interview script, which was kind of interesting, but there was both a host and a guest. Interesting, because I've done this a couple of times at ChatGPT, and usually it doesn't do this. Usually it gives me a solo transcript. Now, for my case, I would just actually go and interview somebody else. And maybe I would take some of these different types of cues as far as for being able to think about interview questions. If I was struggling to create interview questions for a guest, this could be helpful. But I want to be able to use a solo transcript in this case for a podcast episode. So this is what I did. I actually stopped it from generating more things, which you can do. There is a stop button as it is writing. And then instead, I said, can you make this a solo podcast episode script? And that's when it said, sure, here's a solo podcast episode. And then it went into everything that you can then use as far as for your own podcast script about having culture and leadership inside of this podcast episode. Once again, extremely helpful, really being able to use this, especially too, if you do have adult learners. Using podcasts inside of your courses and your trainings just makes a lot of sense to me. I've done a lot of research on this, and usually the feedback is really positive when you can incorporate that into the learning experience. And for those of you who might be a bit nervous, this is brand new to you, you've never done podcasts before, here is your way to actually go and to incorporate this into the type of content for your learning experience. Okay, this next tip just like blew my mind when I did this. I had no idea ChatGPT could even try and go about with doing this. I was playing around with it today to see what would happen if I was thinking along the lines of being able to think about how it would be great if I was in the office setting. As you can tell, I'm working from home. Let's say in the office setting, though, that if I was working on a project, typically what I would do is that I would want to go and get a second set of eyes on something and have someone review it and give me some ideas. Essentially, I'm trying to bounce ideas off of another person. Now, I don't have that in this sense. Let's say, once again, I'm working late in the evening. I can't talk to anybody. I can't Slack message any of my colleagues. Well, what do? ChatGPT. It can actually help you with this, which is really, really interesting. So let's go through. Let me give you an example about this. So I told ChatGPT that I'm thinking about making a new course on learning sciences. I want it to be a cohort-based course around 4 weeks in length. What do you think of this idea? This is then what it told me is that it went into about how a cohort-based course on learning sciences sounds like a great idea. Cohort-based courses are becoming extremely popular because they offer more personalized learning experiences. They foster a sense of community among the participants, basically telling me about why cohort-based learning is a good idea, which indeed it is. Then it told me more about the length of time, about why 4 weeks in length also seems to be reasonable. And it tells me it's important to keep in mind that the course length should be long enough to cover the necessary content and allow participants to apply what they've learned, but not have it be so long that it becomes difficult for them to commit to. It then talks about more about how to design a course, which is kind of funny, talking about considering the target audience, the learning objectives, different methods of instructions and delivery, which of course, we're going to be doing that, but it even as a suggestion, it says, hey, would you consider incorporating interactive activities, discussions, and other forms of engagement to enhance the learning experience? And it goes into more things as well. So then I was like, okay, that's interesting. Is there anything else I should consider with this idea? Do you see any kind of problems with the course? I had no idea what it was going to give me, and then this is what it said. There are a few things you want to consider when designing your cohort-based course on learning sciences. It was telling me about the target audience, to think carefully more about them to ensure that the content, tone, and activities are appropriate for their level. It then talks about the course structure to make sure that it's easy to follow, that my guidelines are clear, the learning objectives do make sense. Then talks about the availability of the instructor, which is interesting and very insightful. It wants to make sure that there is indeed a type of an instructor presence or a facilitator presence for the different types of cohort members to provide more support, engagement, live sessions, responding to discussion posts, things like that. Then it talks about how we would be doing assessments and feedback. So it's saying to be able to consider about the participants' learning experience, making sure that we're providing feedback on their progress, and of course, talking about the technical requirements at the end of the day for what these people are going to be using, pertaining to having the necessary access to things as far as your learning platform, learning management system, tools, process, etc. So then, as far as for with problems, it does mention about how one of the challenges, which is true, I've taught cohort-based learning types of learning experiences for quite a bit of time. One of the problems is making sure that people can keep up with the pace, especially something that is 4 weeks in length, which it does talk about that. It goes into, once again, fostering about the importance of engagement and community, and encourage me to actually put things into group projects and hosting live Q&A sessions. Interesting. If I was talking to one of my colleagues and saying, hey, I have a new idea for this course. I'm thinking about how it's going to be this type of learning strategy is going to be incorporated. We're going to have it be this long. What do you think? This is honestly a response that one of my colleagues would share with me. So I found this fascinating. If you want to be able to bounce ideas and essentially have a buddy to be able to work with, especially during these remote times, can't recommend this enough. Absolutely fascinating to be able to work with. The next idea, and I'm trying to figure out the right wording to be able to say this, basically it's going to be explaining content differently. That's not the best way of saying it. What I'm trying to actually say is that, let's say you were teaching a undergraduate class talking about the ADDIE model. Now, let's say that we were trying to teach them about this, and specifically we focused on the E of ADDIE. We were talking about the evaluation. You were creating content based around this, but then let's say you were invited to then go and to speak to a doctoral level students who also want to know more about the ADDIE model, or maybe you were then going to go speak to high school students and talking about the ADDIE model. What would you do differently? How would you change things? How would you reword things? Maybe rewording is the better way of phrasing it. The point is that you're obviously going to be changing the message for a different type of target audience. The high school level, the undergraduate level, and the doctoral level are all really different. So how would you go about with doing this? Let's put ChatGPT to the test and see what exactly it's going to do with this type of command. Okay, so to start this off, I said, write for me a paragraph about the evaluation stage in ADDIE. The readers are going to be doctoral students, and a majority of them are already instructional designers. Therefore, it gave me this huge paragraph talking all about the evaluation stage, and it goes into all the typical types of things you would think about as an instructional designer. So now let's see what happens when I gave it a prompt and I asked it, can you reword this for a group of freshmen in high school who have never heard of instructional design before? And you can probably guess it's going to change the wording. And it says the evaluation stage is a final part of a process called ADDIE that helps people create effective learning materials. In this stage, designers check to see if the materials they made are good at helping students learn what they need to learn. Now, I'm not going to read all the rest of the things for you, but one of the things that instantly caught my eye is that it changed the level as far as for different types of target audiences, and especially the word good was inside of there. If we're going to be talking to doctoral students who already do have experience of being an instructional designer, we're going to be talking at a different type of a higher level. Obviously, we're not going to be using the word good. We're going to be talking about more along the lines of having an effective approach or something else like that. But instead, it changed the wording to make it seem more oriented for students who were indeed freshmen at high school level. This was interesting. This is really interesting. I could use this in a variety of ways. Obviously, if I was going to be presenting to different types of target audiences, I would, of course, be changing my style, my wording, my tone if I'm talking to freshmen, as opposed to talking to doctoral students or talking to people who already have been people in my field, instructional designers, and they've been doing this for years. I'm going to be changing that. But also, if I was trying to be able to think about, let's say that I'm teaching, and I'm teaching more about the evaluation stage from Addie, and I'm working with a student. Let's say that they're still not understanding what I'm trying to be able to say, and I needed to be able to think about a different way of wording something. Could I then go into ChatGPT and say, like, okay, can you help me out here? I'm trying to be able to say this, but the student's still not understanding it. Is there a better way of rewording it to make it so that it's going to actually help them out? And this will be able to give you a new type of way of thinking about your own content and thinking about a way of rewording things. Once again, really interesting to see about what ChatGPT actually gave us. The next tip is with designing learning objectives. If you're an instructor, a teacher, an instructional designer, you will be designing learning objectives, and ChatGPT can give you a helping hand with this. Now, this is a little bit different, I would say, compared to some of the other ones where I've found that I've had to really go back and forth a lot of the time with ChatGPT to make the types of clear, concise, and transparent learning objectives that I am looking for. Within the instructional design world, you may know, but there are some different types of phrases that we do not say within the learning objectives, where if anything, it seems extremely broad in nature, and we can do more as far as being able to further define that and get that to a granular level so that way students and learners can accurately figure out what exactly they are going to be doing by the end of the course, the training, the program, the workshop, the whatever it is. Well, that makes sense to do so. There are three main culprits that we typically do not use when creating learning objectives, and that is understand, know, and learn. So if there is those types of wordings found within the learning objective, typically we revise them and we try to make them better. So when I go into ChatGPT and I ask it to make me learning objectives, for whatever reason, it always says those things. And I keep on trying to figure out why, but for whatever reason, it keeps on talking about more of these general statements that is typically a big no-no within creating learning objectives. The other thing that I found too that it will do is that you try your best to not use multiple verbs inside of the same type of sentence. You can do more as far as you're being able to break that down, and typically speaking, that means you put the type of, let's say if you do have a learning objective that does have two different action items, then therefore we're going to break those down typically into two different types of learning objectives. And the point of that is that we're trying to be able to accurately assess what the students and what the learners are doing. And if we're asking them to be able to do one thing and then to do another thing and they don't align, well, then therefore that could be essentially two different types of assessments. ChatGPT will also do that too, and it will just keep on throwing in more verbs into learning objectives. And I'm like, no, stop, like make it simpler, make it clear for students and learners to be able to actually figure out what they're doing, what really are the main goals here, what are the main learning objectives. So let me give you an example of this. So I'll stick with the leadership theme as I've been doing throughout this entire video. And this is the prompt. I said, can you design for me 4 learning objectives for leadership training? The target audience is mid-level managers who haven't gone through a leadership training program in over a year. And it says, sure, I'd be happy to help with this. And it gives me 4 different learning objectives. Now, from the 50,000 foot view, the actual goals, the topics that they are saying, it does make sense as far as for developing self-awareness, enhancing communication and collaboration skills, building effective decision-making and problem-solving skills, fostering a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. That's great. That I'm cool with. But when we get into the nitty-gritty, this is when I want to actually change things. So let's go into this one. It says for the very first learning objective, by the end of a training, participants will be able to identify their personal leadership style and understand how it affects their interactions with others. They will also be able to recognize their strengths and areas for improvement as leaders. So that's, to me, 3 learning objectives. That's not actually 1. We're asking people to do different types of things. So therefore, I want to be able to break that down into more detail. And the same thing can be said for the second learning objective, which says participants will be able to apply effective communication techniques in different settings and understand how to establish collaborative relationships with colleagues, direct reports, and other stakeholders. They will also learn how to build a culture of open communication and active listening in their teams. So the words that I was speaking about before: understand, learn. It's really general. What is your definition of understand versus what is my definition of understand as far as for being the instructor or the trainer or the facilitator? We need to be able to get that more aligned with what we're actually trying to be able to ask our students and our learners to do. So with all that being said, I want to revise these, and this is what I'm then going to do. Okay, so my instructions for this is that I wanted to be able to revise them to make them more specific. Do not use the terms understand and learn. Also, there should only be one learning objective per topic, but learning objectives should also only have one verb per sentence. So I gave it a lot of instructions and a lot of commands about how to fix them to my liking with making learning objectives. And then sure enough, it did fix them. So for the first learning objective, now it says by the end of a training, participants will be able to identify their personal leadership style and its impact on team dynamics and productivity. The second type of learning objective, now it says participants will be able to use effective communication techniques to establish collaborative relationships with colleagues, direct reports, and other stakeholders. All in all, it took my advice and it put it into this, and it did reword them to make them more along the lines of what I'm actually looking for. Now, I've actually heard from some of you as far as for how you've gotten around with this style with things, is that you ask ChatGPT to create learning objectives in the voice of so-and-so, or can you actually change it into the style of replicating this taxonomy or something else along those lines. So you actually change the way that it was written with the voice, with the style, and following a type of a taxonomy or following a type of a framework, which seems to work for some of you. I have personally not tried that yet. I've just been doing this as far as for giving it more instructions, and that's worked for me. But that is a way for you to be able to go and develop your own types of learning objectives with ChatGPT. This next tip is on creating entire course, program, or training outlines. I say the word entire because I found that I can ask ChatGPT to help me with any type of length of a new course or a new idea, and it keeps on going and going and going. So if I wanted to be able to, let's say, create a new boot camp about leadership, it's going to be 20 weeks long. I have some ideas for some topics. Can it help me create a solid outline that I can then go and try to be able to figure out more details and do some more research to figure out, is this exactly what I want to be able to teach or design? Sure enough, you can. So let's check that out. So these were my instructions. I said, I'm creating a new boot camp on leadership. This will be a 20-week-long boot camp. We will be covering topics like strategy, culture, networking, DEI/JB initiatives, negotiating, innovation, emotional intelligence, and more. The final project will be to do a presentation demonstrating that students can apply these leadership abilities in the real world. Can you create an outline for me on all of these items? And then it says, sure. Here's an outline for a 20-week leadership bootcamp covering the topics you mentioned. Sure enough, it breaks down all the different types of weeks and the topics that I mentioned, and then added in more based around the related topics to these different types of things. So introduction to leadership, strategy, culture, networking, DEI/JB initiatives, negotiating, influencing, emotional intelligence, communication, decision-making, coaching, performance management, change management, project management, team building, so on and so forth. The point is that it gave relevant, related topics from what I described, and then was adding more into this to be able to help me with trying to actually create a 20-week-long program. I only gave it, I don't know, 7, 8, I forget how many things I just gave it as far as within the prompt of how many topics I had in mind. And it really expanded upon that to different areas that quite honestly make a lot of sense. The other thing too is that if we scroll down a little bit, it then actually tells me about how for the final project presentation, that will be entirely a week 20, and that these presentations are going to be evaluated by a panel of experts inside of leadership. And certainly if I was trying to be able to think more about who the presentation is going to be for, or what the presentation is going to be about, or anything along those lines, I can work from there. Of course, I can also then go and ask ChatGPT to say, hey, can you expand upon this idea for the presentation and for presenting to different types of industry experts and leaders? What do you have in mind? Sure enough, it's going to actually go and expand upon that and give me more detailed information. Now, last but not least, I do want to give a few honorable mentions of other different types of topics. I wanted to go and explain about them too, but I'm finding that this video will be literally 5 hours long if I try to share with you as much as I possibly know so far about what I've been using inside of ChatGPT. So a few honorable mentions inside of here. One is talking about introductory text pertaining to your course, your program, your training, your workshop, whatever. Usually you are going to be writing about more with the learning experience and what these learners and students are going to be going through. If you wanted to be able to have this create for you a type of a course description or something you can give to the participants ahead of time, this is an easy way to be able to do so. Along these same lines are ad copy or sales copy. Let's say that you are a content creator, you have your own course, and you're trying to be able to create some new type of advertising material, and you want to go and try to be able to fire up ChatGPT. You would give it the information and say, can you make something for me that I can just go and put onto my website? It can, and it does a really good job of doing this randomly. As far as for creating like sales pitches for different types of ideas, I actually did this for my course on collaborating and building relationships with subject matter experts. Of course, I have my own sales page. I've already done all that stuff, but I was just like, what would be your sales pitch? Here's all the information. I copied and pasted it over into there, and I said, create for me your own pitch. What would you do? Kind of funny. And I shared that the other day on LinkedIn. It didn't do that bad of a job. Next is talking about creating types of outlines for lesson plans. We've already touched upon that a little bit as far as with the whole boot camp idea, but you can do this for anything, literally for anything, especially for all of you teachers out there as you are creating your own curricula and your own lesson plans. If you want to be able to go and to have a source of inspiration and creativity as far as for with this, definitely ChatGPT can help you there. The next shout out is with proofreading. We all hate editing. We all hate proofreading. If you want to go and to give that into ChatGPT as far as for an important type of an email or a document or for whatever else, if you ask it to be able to review, to make some suggestions, to make some recommendations, it can easily do that for you. And then my final tip, which this might be the 15th tip, maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this video and figure out how many tips I've shared with you today. But the final tip is going to be creating letters of recommendation and with thank you notes. I have had to do a lot of letters of recommendation over the years as far as for providing references for students or colleagues or whatnot, and just being able to go and to get some new ideas, because I found that I say the same things like all the time. I had a template, I have a guide that I usually follow, but I was like, I want to like spruce this up a bit. I want to make it different. Can you give me something? And sure enough, I found that this can be a really useful way as far as for using that. And then same thing too with thank you letters, another simple type of thing, and not to take away the personal touch from it all, but if you are writing like 50 thank you letters for a type of an event or for something else along those lines, it is another helpful idea for you to be able to use. And that, my learning nerds, that is all I have for you today. As much information as I possibly could share with you about what I have found so far about ChatGPT. I am still finding new things all the time. The whole bouncing ideas off of one another thing, that was brand new. I haven't done that one yet, which was wild to be able to see more about what it was telling me. And that conversation could keep on going again and again and again. So there's always more things you can do. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And we're talking specifically about education, learning and development, and those different types of related fields. I promise you that if you search for other fields, you can find out what people are doing and then bring that into your own type of learning experiences as well. I actually was telling a friend of mine the other day, and she's a realtor, about how it was taking her so long to being able to write up all the different types of house descriptions on Zillow and Realtor.com. And I asked her, I was like, have you used ChatGPT yet? And she's like, no, let me try it. I mean, sure enough, she gave it a shot. And it did. It created one of those types of things of like, welcome into your brand new modern ranch. This 2-bed, 3-bath, blah, blah, blah. I went into the whole sales pitch of it all. It was hilarious. It really did sound like someone was actually creating this. And it wasn't AI. It really was a person. So there's always going to be more ways. always going to be more things that we can learn about, but this is just some different types of tips to help you within your own trainings, within your own education, and with everything else that you are doing. If you want to read more about a lot of the things that I mentioned about, I do have a blog post that I will share about different types of ways of using ChatGPT as well pertaining to instructional designers, but of course, it definitely does go and relate to teachers, instructors, professors, trainers, and everything else of a sort. But that, folks, that is all I have for you today. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe, please like, please share it with a friend as well, too. It took a long time to make this, so much appreciated if you could share this out with other people. And, of course, the last thing I always have to tell you at the end of the day, stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.